Welcome to Section 7 and Lesson 2 of Hope. In the last lesson, you learned about the importance and purpose of confrontation from a biblical perspective. In this lesson, we will explore how to know when you are ready to confront and what it looks like to confront effectively. Confronting is a difficult step, and to be clear, it is not something we should rush into when it involves areas of significant hurt or emotional pain. We must be prepared, prayed up, and have a plan. We also need to remember that healing is God's business and not something we can force or orchestrate with others according to our own timing. So we need to ask God to help us discern what He is doing and when and how He wants to do it, both for us and our best interest as well as the other person. To the best of our ability, we want to follow His lead. So let's review a few specific criteria for knowing when you might be ready to confront. First, I need to repeat one more time that you should take the step of confrontation only when you have clearly separated responsibilities in your head. If you are still feeling unclear and uncertain about the hurts or sins committed against you, or what is or isn't clearly the responsibility the person or persons who hurt you have, please sort this out first. In the scripture passages we have reviewed in this workshop, it is clear that confronting involves knowing what sin to confront other people with. Jesus also has no doubt or hesitation in declaring the sins and problems that are true. It is best to save the step of confronting for when you are clear for yourself on the facts and evidence of the sins and the hurts. Second, being ready to confront also means that you have enough emotional strength and or support in place to handle potential dismissal or rejection. This is obviously true when considering confronting someone directly. Emotionally, it is important to be at a place in your own healing and growth to believe you can handle more pain if it comes. There is never a guarantee how the other person will respond, and we must be prepared to accept reality whatever it might be. This also includes having supportive people in your life who can hold you up in prayer and rejoice or weep with you, depending on the results. Even if you are only confronting the person on paper or through another exercise that will be explained shortly, being emotionally ready to do this work and having others to support you and be there to provide comfort can only help with your healing. That is certainly one of the reasons why we have the Hope coaching calls and support community as well to support you in this process. The next several criteria for readiness we will cover are specific to confronting someone directly, as this requires additional preparation and caution. So in addition to the above, if you will be taking the step to confront someone directly over a significant emotional wound, being ready to confront means you also need to have a specific plan to follow if you are rejected, including what boundaries you need to set. Before acting to confront, you will want to spend time specifically identifying what boundaries of space, time, or access, or connection might be needed if they do not listen or reject or dismiss you. Consider how you will feel if this happens and what you may need and for how long to regroup. Also, consider what you will specifically say if this occurs. How much time do you think you may need to process or rebalance if this occurs? What kind of physical distance or boundaries will you want or need and for how long? Will you need to limit the person's access to you in some way, to your space, home, phone, social media, etc., and for how long? What level of interaction will you be willing to have with them? Under what circumstances? And for how long if things go badly? Having a specific, detailed, and well-considered plan in place beforehand for the worst-case scenario can help you feel more prepared emotionally for confronting and help you feel less overwhelmed afterwards if things don't go well. You also want to be clear on why you are setting the specific boundaries and whether they are reasonable and appropriate to the evidence or mostly driven just by emotion. Getting input and wisdom on these beforehand is always helpful. Next, when confronting someone directly over significant emotional wounds, it is important to have rehearsed and practiced your confrontation, including what communication strategies you may need to use. Before setting a date or time or meeting for the confrontation, spend some time writing down what you want to say as specifically as you can. As mentioned, consider the specific behaviors, sins, and actions that you want to confront and what evidence you have to present or describe so you can be as clear as possible. After you have written these down in detail, practice saying what you want to say out loud. What specific words might be helpful? What tone of voice do you need to use? We will look further at details of confronting in the next section, so the important thing here is to plan for and take the time to rehearse and practice ahead of the confrontation. When we know there are powerful emotions involved in a situation, it is essential that we practice and rehearse to help ourselves stay in our calm and logical brain as much as possible when the time comes, giving ourselves the best chances of success. Finally, when confronting someone directly over significant emotional wounds, we know we are ready when we can go with an attitude of grace and love, even if it is tough love as we described in the previous lesson, truly wanting to do what's right and best in God's sight. Before we confront, it is important to check our own hearts. When we have been significantly wounded or hurt, it may not be realistic to expect that our motives will feel 100% pure, and we will likely have mixed emotions in the process. But we still need to check our hearts and our ultimate purpose. Is our goal to confront in love and truth with a true desire that they will be open to change? If they are willing to change, are we ready to consider the possibility of reconciliation? Are we committed to confronting because it is the right thing to do more than just what it might mean for us? God calls us to do things because they are right, righteous, and just, even when we don't feel like it, or even if we don't ultimately benefit from it. Obviously, our hope, prayer, and desire is that the step of confronting will also help us to heal from our pain, but that cannot be our only goal. Our goal is to participate in God's redemptive plan. I believe that when we still do what is right because it is right, that God can best work to bring the healing we need, even if things don't go the way we want. So with all that said, what should it look like when we actually confront a person who is a source of our trauma directly? First, when confronting someone directly, we should look to bring an attitude of seeking to restore and give grace. In Galatians 6:1, the Bible says, "Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted." We must remember that regardless of the other person's sins against us, we too are sinners in need of grace. We can be clear and firm when confronting, while maintaining a spirit of humility and not superiority or condemnation. As we have previously discussed, we can judge rightly and explain the truth of right and wrong while not being judgmental. This is difficult, and if our hearts are deep, will likely not be perfect, but is still the attitude we must seek and ask for from God for our sake and theirs. Next, when we confront, we should seek to do it with the right timing. This may include asking to meet with the person at a specific day and time, and should also include a time and place where there won't be unhelpful interruptions or disturbances. You may also consider asking to meet with the person in a public space, such as a common area at work, or a restaurant, or a park, as this can create natural boundaries that can keep both ourselves and the other person from escalating or getting too upset for fear of embarrassment. We should also consider timing in regard to the emotional state of the other person, or the time of day that might affect them being more stressed, tired, or hungry. To the best of our ability, we want to choose an optimal time and location when confronting over issues of significant emotional hurt. Similarly, if there is a history of a difficult or disconnected relationship with the person, it may be more helpful to take time to first pursue opportunities to better connect or build rapport in the relationship first. Of course, this is not always possible or helpful depending on the situation, but could be important to improving the odds of a more positive outcome of the confrontation in some circumstances. For example, if an adult child felt rejected or disconnected from a parent whose behavior was more hurtful in the past but is more manageable now, it could be helpful to spend some time building bridges, offering to do some things together, or help the parent in some ways, showing interest in them and making it easier for them to hear about the hurts they caused when the time comes. Third, when we confront, we should come prepared with the evidence or facts about specific events and feelings. If we have completed our readiness steps as previously described, we will come with clear evidence, facts, and/or our specific examples of behavior, past or present, to explain as we confront. It is usually helpful to have these written down and with you during the conversation to make sure you cover things clearly. The focus of confronting should be on behaviors and actions more than the person's character. As the old saying goes, we want to attack the issue, not the person. By coming with specific facts, evidence, and issues related to specific events, actions, and memories, we can keep the focus on behavior more than motives. Fourth, when we confront, we will often need to come with determination to be heard. Because confronting is hard and managing emotions can be a challenge, we want to avoid getting interrupted or sidetracked as much as possible. To do this, it is often best to start by letting the person know what you are asking for and what you want. For example, to help communicate your determination, you can set the stage by saying something like the following. Thanks for being willing to meet with me today. I appreciate you taking the time. There are some things I would like to share and explain to you for the next few minutes about me and how I've been feeling, so I'm asking you to just let me talk and only listen. I promise I will give you time to hear your thoughts and response when I'm done, but I'm asking that you not interrupt and just listen so you can hear and try to understand all of it before you respond. Can you please do that for me? If you think if they are likely to say no to that question, you don't have to include it. Thanks, I really appreciate it. After you have set the stage in this kind of way, you can move ahead with steps I am about to describe. Once the person understands they are just going to listen, it is best if you say all that you need to say as outlined in the following steps before letting them respond. If the person starts to talk or interrupt during your explanation of these things, ask them politely to wait and remind them that it is important for you to share all of it first so they can understand the whole story and intent of what you are asking. First, compliment. The first step in the confrontation is to recognize and acknowledge any good things you can about the person, their intentions, or things you may have been grateful for. You want to do this both for your sake and theirs. For you, taking time to identify any good qualities or characteristics in the person helps you to see them as not all evil or bad, which is usually the case, and to also see them as a person still made in the image of God. Also, frequently, the people who hurt us have lacked the knowledge, skill, or insight, or been preoccupied with their own problems or pain, hurting us out of what they lack or as an overflow of their own problems, more than a desire to damage us. Taking time to identify positives, good, and strengths helps us to see them as human and also can create a foundation of grace for them to be better able to hear what you are going to say. Second, confess. Similarly, this next step in the process of confrontation is confessing our own feelings, attitudes, or imperfections. Before telling the person the specifics of what they have done to hurt us or sinned against us, we can confess ways that we are also imperfect people and that our intentions in sharing what we are about to share is to talk about how we feel and how we have seen and experienced things. We can also use this time to share our intentions, confessing that we hope that what we are sharing will help to resolve some things for you and move forward. Third is confront. The third step in the process of confronting is the actual confrontation about specifics to the events, actions, behaviors, or words of the other person and how you were or have been affected by them. At this stage, you will want to use the information you have prepared in previous workshops, selecting specific situations with details of words, actions, or behaviors to describe as evidence of what they have done and how it made you feel. For example, Dad, now that I hope you understand that I am also aware of my own faults and weaknesses and that I appreciate all your efforts in providing for me growing up, I want to share a couple of things that cause me hurt and pain that I want to work through with you if we can. You may or may not remember this the same way as me, but when I was 9 years old, I remember you fighting with Mom, threatening divorce and telling her you were seeing another woman. You may not know that I overheard this, and it hurt me deeply. When this happened, I felt very afraid and sad and have struggled with a sense of insecurity since that time. I've also felt angry with you that you would reject Mom for another woman and hurt our family in that way. After that time, you also seemed to distance yourself from our family, and I felt abandoned. Hopefully you can see from this short example that the purpose is to describe a specific event or hurtful behavior and how it made or makes you feel. For the sake of not overwhelming the person, it is usually best to focus on no more than 2 to 3 examples at most, choosing things that best represent the hurt or actions of that person. When you are done describing these things, it can also be helpful to be clear about what you are asking for. For example, you might say, I know this is probably hard to hear, but I'm telling you because I don't want to be upset or angry about these things anymore, and I am hoping you will be willing to take responsibility for your part. Finally, commit. Before ending your part and letting them know it's okay to respond if they want to, you can use the final step of commit. This step lets the other person know that moving forward, you want to walk together in truth and move ahead if they are willing to take responsibility. Communicating your commitment to them and the relationship in whatever form, and even with the boundaries you think are needed, can communicate value to the other person and your willingness to be open and reasonable. This final step is not always possible depending on the nature of the offenses and the relationship itself. When it is not possible or wise, you can simply wrap things up after the confrontation step to get their response. Because the process of confronting can be difficult and anxiety-producing, it can often be helpful to simply write out all you want to say based on these steps in the form of a script. Then, when you have the meeting with the person, simply tell them that you have something you want to say, but to make it easier, you want to read it to them, and that you will give them a chance to respond to you when you are done. If you write out a script or letter to the person in advance, I highly recommend that you read it to them out loud, no matter how difficult that may seem. Giving it to them to read or sending it to them separately will not have the same effect for you in the healing process, and can also cause more confusion. No matter how they respond or what happens in the meeting, the act of confronting the person directly and reading or saying your words and feelings out loud will achieve greater healing and empowerment for you in the long run. Confronting indirectly. As mentioned previously, it is not always possible or beneficial to confront the person or person who hurt us directly in this way. When this is the case, we can still do it and follow the above steps, but by writing a letter to the person covering all of the same steps that we do not intend to send. When confronting the person this way, it is important to set aside a chunk of time to write as much of the letter as possible in one setting. Doing this will give you the opportunity to get the flow of what you want to say and what it might have looked like and sounded like if you were able to do it in person. You can also always review your letter one or more times later to fill in anything important you felt you missed or wanted to add. Take as much time as you would like to continue to revise the letter until you are satisfied overall with the content and what you want to say. When the letter is complete, the best option is to then find a close friend, counselor, or pastor to read it out loud to. Again, the act of reading the letter out loud and simulating the confrontation is a helpful step of exposure and release for emotional pain. Taking the time to arrange this and share it with another person can help resolve difficult emotions. Finally, if reading the letter out loud to another person is not an option, one final approach is to read the letter out loud to an empty chair, imagining that the person is there listening. You may want to do it 2 ways. First, with all the emotions, rage, or sadness you feel, and then in a more straightforward, assertive, truthful, and respectful way. Doing both will help you to both externalize pent-up emotions and grief while also providing yourself an experience of confronting in a way that shows your ability to be assertive and strong. If the person is dead or gone, you can also imagine a response from them at the end where they are willing to take responsibility for their sin or behavior and ask for your forgiveness. Even if this is not the way it would have played out in real life, imagining it this way can help in the healing process. As we wrap up this lesson, it is important to acknowledge the reality of how someone may respond when confronted directly. At the beginning of this section, we discussed several passages of Scripture about confrontation. From these passages, we can see that the Bible is realistic about how others may respond when confronted with their sin. When Jesus confronted the Pharisees, it is an example of how sometimes we will confront people whose hearts are hard. These were not people who were ready or willing to own their sin and repent, and Jesus confronted them in a way that reflected this reality by being clear and firm, but no reconciliation could happen. The passage from Matthew 18 is also clear that some people will not listen even if confronted by multiple people or the church. Similarly, it may be your situation that the people who you confront won't care or be blind or unwilling to see and accept the truth of what you have to say. They may be stubborn, selfish, or still caught up in their own pain or addictions and reject or minimize what they have done. And that will be sad and tragic. However, it is also not ultimately your concern. Our job for our own sake as well as for theirs, and to be obedient to God, is to speak the truth in love and let God handle the rest. However, it is also possible that the person's heart could be soft or somewhere in between at the time you confront them. It is possible that the person could immediately take responsibility and ask for forgiveness, or it is possible that they will feel defensive and overwhelmed and not ready to respond. If this seems to be the case during the confrontation, you might consider telling them that you would like to give them some time to think about it and will follow up with them or ask them to get back with you by a certain date to let you know what they think. This is not ideal, but if you think they just need more time for things to sink in, it can be a helpful option. Finally, in a previous section, we explored the parable of the sower in Matthew 13, where Jesus describes the different kind of soil that seeds of spiritual truth can fall on. The person you are confronting will also have soil in a certain condition when you meet with them. It is of course important to pray in advance and to also ask others to pray that the person's heart will be soft with good soil to hear and receive the truth. However, their soil may also be unreceptive or rocky or full of thorns that get in the way. This does not mean it is the end of the story. Your willingness to confront and do it in love might plant seeds for the future that can bring greater reconciliation or healing. And in the meantime, you will be freer to heal and move on with your life as you trust God with the final outcomes. Now that we have explored the biblical importance of confronting, the process of confronting, and possible responses and boundaries needed, in the next lesson, we will review some questions for reflection and additional healing activities to help you consider the when, where, and how of this step in your healing from trauma. I'll see you in the next lesson.